Welcome to REINE TV, where we talk about real estate investing and entrepreneurism. My name is Ryan Harper, and on this podcast, we are talking to Scott Dikkers. Scott Dikkers is the co-founder of The Onion. The Onion is a satirical newspaper, magazine, website that was from way back that also was probably inspired The Daily Show and The Colbert Report and all those things. Scott talked to him a couple years ago, and now get to talk to him post-pandemic to see how his business has come along. So I really hope you like it. I love this dude. He is awesome. And stick around, check it out. Let us know in the comments what you think. Thanks for being here. Yeah, it's crazy. I really wanted to talk to you. First of all, thank you for doing this again. It's been, 2.5, almost 3 years since the last time we spoke. One of the big things is I wanted to get your take on mainly the entrepreneur side of what you've been up to, because when we first talked, I think you were just getting started, making more courses, really trying to get your self brand out there and grow that. And I'd love to have a discussion about what that was like during the pandemic and all that, and the craziness, because it, in a lot of ways, and I'll stop talking here in a second, but in a lot of ways, the pandemic ruined so many lives, not just ending lives, but businesses. But for like the online marketplace, it was like a gold rush.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I learned being at The Onion for so many years was diversification. So we started in print, but then as soon as we had the opportunity, we started doing fake radio news that we syndicated to radio stations. And as soon as we could afford to, we made a book and we published a book. So we were in different media, different markets. And then as soon as the internet came around, we went online. And that saved us because there was a big internet crash around 2001. And so many big websites that had really just behemoth investors, $1 billion invested. I went to one company, just as an aside. It was based in San Francisco, and James Cameron was one of the investors. And they had an airplane hangar of people in cubicles doing like digital animation and stuff. After 2001's crash, they were gone. The whole thing was just gone.
Right.
But The Onion survived because we had our print publication that was our primary business. The digital was just a fun, let's try to diversify sort of thing. But all our eggs weren't in that basket. And then we started doing online video. And then in 2008, the print market crashed. Print advertising just bellied up after the housing market crash, and magazines were folding. But The Onion had moved mostly digital by that point, so we survived because we had diversified. So after I left The Onion, I was doing a lot of performing. I was going a lot to colleges and trying to be funny on stage and doing corporate events and stuff like that. And then I wrote this book about how to do comedy, how to write humor, that kind of developed into this series of courses I was doing for the Second City, in-person courses. And yeah, you're right. I was just starting to ramp up my own brand with those courses, rolling them out online right as the pandemic hit. So you're right. It was a gold mine. Everybody wanted to learn. Everybody wanted to take a new course, learn a new skill. And I used that like in my marketing. I was like, hey, you're sitting around at home. You got nothing to do. Why not learn to be a comedy genius? I've got the recipe. All you got to do is take this simple course. Got a ton of people to sign up for the course. We're still having a great time. I give people lifetime access to the course and to me. So we do these they're about 3 times a month meetings where we go over material, and it's like having a writer's room. So anybody trying to do comedy knows it's critical to have a group who can review your work before you put it out there. And it's one of the things I like to provide. So it's been a great ride. It's been super fun. And I got lucky. It was lucky. But again, you make your own luck. I diversified,
And I think that's a applicable lesson that you can apply to so many different avenues. One thing that we discussed last time that we talked was, one thing that surprised me the most about you is everyone and their dog knows the Onion, but maybe Scott Dikkers who, and at the time, if I remember correctly, you were saying that you can't sell Scott Dikkers, but I can sell something else. So you were very intentional about making it brand the company so you could sell the thing versus brand yourself. Do you regret any of that, or you're like, hey, it paid off and now I just got to restart over? Or do you kind of regret going back and going, hey, maybe I could have given myself a little bit of spotlight?
I don't remember what I told you last time we talked, but my feeling,
I'm making it up anyway.
No, I do remember that conversation, but I don't remember specifically how I was feeling at that time, because right now I'm feeling, well, first of all, it was absolutely the right decision to hide my identity when it came to the Onion, because it allowed the Onion to survive. And when the Onion moved its offices from New York to Chicago in 2012, it lost 80% of its staff, and it never would have survived that. And I'm talking writing staff, so talent. It never would have survived that move if it had been branded as Scott Dikkers, the Onion, or whatever, or I had been some sort of celebrity, because I would come and go, and I would leave, and then they'd bring me back. And so for the business, absolutely the right decision.
Well, sorry.
For me personally, it was still the right decision for the Onion, and I don't regret it, but it did make my life harder, because you're right. I had to build the brand of me starting from scratch. But I will say this about that. I like that. I like the challenge of starting over from scratch. I do it way too often. I build something up, and then I say, I've had it with that. I'm going to move on. And then I start from square one. And part of it to me is I want to still prove to myself and to the world that this is a meritocracy, and that if I'm doing good work, it will be successful. So it would be super easy to just attach my name to something and use the coattails of that to succeed at the next thing. But there really wouldn't be much of a challenge in that for me. I really need to be scrambling and hustling and fighting for eyeballs, just like every other Joe Schmo out there. It's so competitive in the digital space. And I just launched a new podcast where I'm doing comedy. I'm just trying to be funny. And the competition there is fierce. It's like everybody and his brother is out there trying to be funny and trying to get a viral video and stuff. I am very comfortable in that environment, just being in a really heated, competitive space.
Right.
I like that. That gives me the juice for whatever reason,
Well, it's funny because my competition is, I went to a comedy show last night, and it was, I don't want to be disparaging, but it was local guys. And I was going because the host of the show was like, hey, come to my show. I was like, yeah, I'll go. And obviously that's a great opportunity for a first date. So this girl I've been talking to, hey, this comedy show. So first date, and what this comedy show was. And I will give props to the ingenuity and the inventiveness of the idea, but all the comics were dressed up as Marvel characters, and the comedy was based around the Marvel universe. I didn't know that. I just thought they were dressed up. And my date was she was like, I didn't realize we had to study before this. So parts of it were funny, parts were not, but it made me, I whispered in her ear, I was like, going to things like this makes you appreciate a Dave Chappelle, a Chris Rock, Andrew Schultz, Joe Rogan, these guys that have really honed their craft. And it was just again, all the praise to my friend that did the thing, but I was just like, God damn it, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, it's hard, and the problem with succeeding in that environment, and why these guys are so great, the people at the top of the field, is because they're not just competing against everybody in the world trying to do comedy. In this day and age, with social media and the way things go viral and the way eyeballs are found, you're competing against everybody's best, funniest joke of their life. Every day, there's somebody in the world who's having their best day, and they're going to be the funniest they've ever been. And so you're on a level playing field with them, every day, a new person. So that's incredibly competitive.
Right. One thing that I'm trying to work on, but I can't, is like if I think something's funny, I tell everybody the same thing, but I also suffer from bad memory. So people are like, Ryan, we've had this conversation 3 times, like, and it's not funny, but I'm like, no, come on, it's funny. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, well, of course you're right. You're Scott Dikkers, but
everybody does that. And I'll tell you a little thing. So my girlfriend and I have this thing now where if we tell the same story twice or 3 times, telling a story we've told before, which I think everybody does, instead of saying, you told me that before, we do this thing now where we're like, oh, is that right? Is that right? And then we immediately know the other person is joking about that. And we get a laugh about it. And it's like a fun little moment instead of being like a tense moment, because everybody has those moments.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't train everyone in your life to do that, but it made me think of that because it's a thing we all do.
So going back to the business side of things, as you're building, like what are some lessons that you learned or things looking back 2 years, like, man, I wish I would have done this or should have done this. What are some lessons that you got out of that?
Oh my God, where to start? There's so many. Like I always say, failure is the best teacher. And I look back on all the failures and all the missteps. And that's where I think I've learned the most, success, I see it as sort of like a lucky windfall. I almost never draw lessons from success. Maybe I should be looking at that. But for example, before I started doing The Onion, I was doing a daily comic strip. And I was doing really well with it. I was self-syndicating it to newspapers, and I sold T-shirts with my characters on them at a local T-shirt shop. And the woman who owned the T-shirt shop wanted a contract. And I was like 22, 23. And we were making so much money selling T-shirts, like, thousands of dollars a month just from selling T-shirts. And I figured, great, yeah, I'll sign a contract. I didn't even read the contract. Now, this is how much of a country rube I am from the farm country. I was just wowed that there was a contract. So I signed it. And little did I know, she had locked me into a 10-year deal that automatically renewed for another 10 years. So when my comic strip became really popular and I got a big offer from a major publisher, the same publisher who does the Calvin and Hobbes, the Far Side, like the best publisher of comic books there is, they wanted the merchandise. They wanted to sell it all over the world. I couldn't get out of that contract with the T-shirt lady. She wouldn't budge. So huge missed opportunity. What did I learn from that? I read the contracts now. Not only do I read, this may seem really basic. Not only do I read the contracts, but I negotiate the contracts. If I see something in there that I don't like, I'm like, I don't like that. And we change it because, boy, the way I grew up, like I just didn't feel empowered to change a contract. It was almost like, ooh, it's written in stone. You have to write it. So now anytime I have a deal, I want to make it the most favorable possible deal to me. Again, this might be like so obvious to anyone else in business, but I'm not a business person. I'm a comic person. I came to this from the creative side of things, from the jokes side of things. Never had to deal with any kind of business because I had a business partner at The Onion who ran all the business and I just did the jokes. So I'm blundering into like business stuff and managing people and being an entrepreneur, totally blind, like just totally not knowing anything. So much of what I learned is probably very basic, like that.
What about staffing? Do you have a team?
Yeah. So right now I have a little team that I work with for my online courses and that whole business. And it's very lean. It's a very skeletal team. And for my comedy podcast, I have a little team of writers, like 4 people. And that's incredibly helpful. They basically send me prompts every week. And then I sort of riff on those, and I try to come up with a comedy routine that suits my voice, because nobody can write for you, but they can get close, and they can write prompts, and they can have subtext that you can work with. So that's been really fun. That's like having a little mini writer's room, But, the one thing I learned about staffing at The Onion was how to get top people, like how to get the A players. And the simple way that I've used to do that is I have to be playing my A game, and I have to be doing my absolute best, because that attracts people who like to do the same thing. So if you're a leader in your field, people from all over the world will see that, and they will come to you. And that's basically what happened at The Onion. The top people were approaching us trying to get jobs. Now, the ironic thing there is that I didn't hire those people. What I wanted to hire were people who were a blank slate, who had zero comedy experience. So the trick then was how to weed those people out of we must have gotten hundreds of submissions every day once The Onion became well known. And it was pretty easy to sift through to find the gems in all those submissions. There were the really super experienced people who'd worked on TV shows and so on. They were just rejected out of hand. Then there were the sort of competent submitters who knew how to write a cover letter, had a nice resume, et cetera, et cetera. I would occasionally read their material, and it was just never any good. People were trying to ape The Onion's voice, and they couldn't really get it. It's harder to do than it looks. Then there were the people who were just young, eager, didn't know how to send a submission in, but their jokes were funny. They had like 10 headline submissions that were funny. I would always call those people. And it would be a very similar story. It would be like, oh, I'm depressed, so I haven't had a job in a while. I live in my mother's basement, stuff like that. And those were the people I wanted. Those were the people I hired. And, The Onion has produced so many Emmy-winning, Oscar-winning, best-selling authors, writers. They're like the best writers of satire in the world. So I definitely learned to think outside the box when it comes to how to find the best people, because depending on the industry, you might need a different strategy for how you find the best people.
So when you were finding these people, was it, hey, how were you able to identify those? Is it just going, hey, these are the traits we want? Like, because one thing I struggle with, I have a small media company now, and I always tell the team the hardest part about having this business is the people, it's the staffing, and it's just like the people element is the hardest part, because if I have a camera, if I turn it on, it turns on. If I turn it off, it turns off. If it breaks, you buy a new one or you upgrade or whatever. But with people, it's never so black and white. There's always this huge landscape of gray. And like, you hire somebody because you think they have these traits, and then they don't have those traits. And then you're just like, but I've already invested time. And I know I'm too nice as a business owner, as a boss, whatever, because I see the good in everybody, and I get taken advantage of for that, because of that. Like, how are you identifying top level talent? Because when I hear you have, hey, these are the people we want, but they have no experience, I also hear, maybe I can get them at a discount, because the guy that has all these writing credits and all these shows, you're probably going to have to pay that person 5x than the entry level person.
Yeah, it was never a question of money, because The Onion had its rate that it paid people. It paid.
Oh, it's a standard.
Yeah, standard rate. And anyone who was submitting just wanted the prestige of working at The Onion. They would take a pay cut to work at The Onion. And I wasn't the money guy, so I didn't even decide what that amount was. It was decided by the business guys, the bean counters. And no, I wanted those newbies because they were moldable, and but the way I found them was that they were funny. So you and I are very similar in that way. Like, I see the potential. I always see the best in people. And from just a submission, I can see in a joke that somebody has something to say. Like, there are, professional $1 million comedy writers who write for Hollywood who don't have anything to say. They can write a great joke, but what's the subtext? Like, what's the interesting idea they're communicating through that joke? Is there any pain there? Is there any awareness of like what's wrong with society, et cetera, et cetera? When I would find these people who were just like lonely or depressed or unfulfilled people who would write in with these great jokes, I knew that if you give those people a soapbox, they're going to write great satire. So again, it was all like job specific. If you're talking about, what are some jobs that maybe aren't creative? Like, I had just hired a new assistant. My old assistant got married and moved on to have kids, so didn't want to work anymore. And so the way I find that person is, an assistant, like a personal assistant, is somebody who's going to be all up in your business. They're going to know your life. They're going to know everything about you. And you just need them to be your mom. You just need them to take care of every last little detail. So I need a service-oriented person. And I was reminded of that story. I think Tony Robbins told this story of how, now I'm going to forget the name of the airline, but it was an airline that was hiring new flight attendants. And they put on this like seminar to invite all the people who wanted to work as flight attendants. And they would have them get up on stage and give a talk. And the flight attendant applicants all thought that they were being judged on the talk, but the people hiring were looking at the audience, and they were looking at who's the most engaged, who's an active listener, who's like going like this and like that. That's who we want as a flight attendant. So looking at, who's service oriented, who's eager to please, who will go to the ends of the earth to help someone. Like that's what I want as an assistant. So that's working out great. And again, it's all job specific. I just want to find someone who just to their core almost has an identity of being that job,
And have you always been able to do that? Because for me, one thing I've identified in the last 2 years of hiring, firing, and turnover is I am no longer the first point of contact. I need everybody else in the team to interview this person first, because again, I'm like, oh, I see. Yeah, you're great. You're hired. Like I don't think I've ever been able to get through like 15 interviews. It's like, so you have a pool of people. It's like the first one you meet, like, oh, they're great, hired. And then the team is like, no, let us. And even if we do identify somebody we like, we need to spend a week's worth of like a working interview. Like maybe we just hire them from our contract to work with. But again, it's just because I'm like, you're hired.
Yeah, well, I have that instinct as well. And oftentimes I just act on it. And if the person is not a good fit, you learn right away, because I basically throw them in, sink or swim. And it's like a trial period. I give everybody a trial period because I want to make sure it works. So it's a great system, because if in the trial period they take the ball and run with it, you got a winner and it's going to work out. And if they don't, like you've really lost nothing. You haven't invested a lot in training. I don't really do a lot of investment in like somebody's education or training until they're through that probationary period.
How long is that for you?
For me, it's 3 months. I do 3 months.
And
you often know earlier, but that's like, you're going to know everything you need to know in 3 months.
Well, I've heard for years, you hire slow, fire fast. The minute you identify, you fire. But what I have is that, but hey, but I've invested time. I really like this person. I want to give him a chance. Let's see if things turn around. And what I've learned is it just bites in the ass. Like I just recently just had to let somebody go, and we knew 2-3 months ago that this person wasn't a good culture fit, work ethic, all that. But attitude, he had a great attitude 80% of the time. Like he was like an 80%er, where it's like he worked on it until he was bored with it and moved on to something else. But the problem is, in a production situation where we're producing videos, we're producing content, and you produce 80% of video that never gets released, then that means 100% of your time was worthless. So anyway, not to harp on that, but it's just, it's funny because like now it's like maybe now I've learned my lesson where when I know, hey, it's not working out, move on,
Yeah, I basically hire fast and fire fast. So I want to get somebody in there right away to find out if they're a good fit. And if
Yeah.
they're not, I know really fast. And they know too. It's usually not a painful firing. It's like, this obviously is not working out.
See, I knew I liked you because that's how I'm a hire fast, fire slow, but I know I should be a fire fast. So,
Yeah.
but maybe it's the echo chamber thing, hey, he's saying something I agree with. So he's right.
Maybe.
Going back to the contracts, do you have, is there any other advice for like people that were in a similar situation, creatives or writers that, hey, obviously read the contract, but what are some other little notes or tips there?
Boy, yeah, for creative people, the thing that I'm always pushing for is more money to the creatives. Like creatives should get paid more. There's a culture, especially in comedy, that you're expected to work for free for a long time.
Exposure.
And you get exposure. And I think that's great if you're doing your own thing, if you're doing your own podcast, if you're doing open mic nights, of course, that should be free. That's you bootstrapping your own business.
Right.
But if you're working for somebody else, they should pay you, and only in certain special circumstances do I recommend that someone offer to be like an intern or to be an unpaid person if they think they can learn a lot and it's really going to help their career. But that's with the goal in mind of eventually getting paid by that company. So that's something I did at The Onion. We would always bring on interns. We had things called writing fellows as a way to get people to understand the culture, see if they fit in. And if they do, invariably, we would offer them a staff position. But when it comes to negotiating a deal to work for somebody else, like after you've gone through that initial period, you've proven yourself, people are always afraid to ask for more. They're always afraid to ask for what they're worth. And I'm sure any experienced business person knows, go in strong, like say I'm worth X amount, and start big and don't be afraid to give the big number. And especially if you've been working for that company, maybe you know their business, you know their revenue. People in business who hire creatives often have this attitude that the business people should get the lion's share of the money, like 95% of the money. 5% should go to the creatives. Or it's almost like the opposite of a talent agent. A talent agent gets 10 or 15%. The artist gets the rest. In business, I feel like that whole number is reversed, and the business people feel like they should be making all the profits. I think comedy people should be making a percentage of the profits. I think they should be making a hefty salary. And so I always pay people as much as I can afford. And if I could go back in time and if I could have control over how The Onion paid writers, I would have made sure that The Onion writers got a percentage of the profits in addition to a salary. Nothing builds loyalty like a percentage of the profits. Mm-hmm. And everybody's then working for the same goal. Everybody wins. It's just like the ratio of CEO pay to bottom line worker pay in this country is obscene. It's just absolutely obscene. And I think we're starting to see the effects of that because customer service is the worst it's ever been in my lifetime. Competition between, like, unless it's a monopoly, unless it's an area of the economy that's a monopoly, the competition is pretty lame. There's usually not like an obvious great choice. We can all name like companies on one hand that we think are great companies that have great customer service, great product, and customers love them. They're like really loyal. Most people hate all the companies. Imagine if we just took a little bit of that CEO pay and shared it with workers. You'd have like Anderson Windows is one company that I always think of because everyone knows they're the best company to buy windows from. And they give their employees a percentage of the profits. It's like, it's pure Marxism, and everybody's afraid of Marxism. Everybody's afraid of that word. but it works,
My producer is in the other room just jumping in joy because he just gave me a smiley face.
He's a Marxist.
Yes. So, but I mean, along that lines, I think the golden parachute thing is really one of the biggest things, because with those CEO types that you're mentioning, like, they're paid no matter what. They could fail miserably and they still get that golden parachute of hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever. And it makes zero sense. Yeah. I don't get that at all.
And they didn't even calculate, like, they have this fiduciary responsibility to profit and to take care of the shareholders, which I think is stupid and backwards. The fiduciary responsibility should be to the customer. And they don't think in terms of what is this, what are the optics here? What are our customers going to think if our CEO failed and we paid him $300 million to quit or to get fired? Like, it's so bad. It's such bad PR. And there's so many things that these companies could do and they're simple, they're just stupid, simple little things that would be huge for PR, that would make people love and adore them, that would make people want to work for them. It just, they need a better metric for how to measure the success of a company than just pure shareholder profit.
Right. I had a really, really good question, but then the Marxist thing threw me off. I forgot what I was going to say.
Take your time.
We'll edit this out. No one needs to look like a complete idiot. But it was I know what I was going to ask you about writing, the writers. One thing that I struggle with as is like, what is that pay? Because I don't come from a media background. I don't come from a production background. I've never staffed a writer's room. So what is the pay for, like, when you were talking about your podcast, people will give you a premise to expand on. Now, are you paying by the hour? Are you paying by the idea? Like, how does that work out? And, cause I just don't know. Is a writer a $5 a letter job, or is $100,000 a year salary, or millions? Like, what is it? What's the range?
Yeah. So there's a certain industry standard. And that's what I go by. And I wish I could pay more. Like, I pay according to my means as well. So my comedy podcast is brand new. It doesn't have sponsors. So, I'm not paying anybody like a salary. This is total freelance work for them. So I base that on, if you sell a joke to The Onion, if you sell a headline idea or whatever, you're basically getting paid on average about $1 a joke. So if you send in a list of 20, and that's any joke, not just jokes that are used. If you send in a list of 25 jokes, that's $25. That's pretty standard in the industry. So that's what I do. And if at some point I can afford to do more, absolutely doing more. I don't like paying like the minimum industry standard by all means, but I think everybody understands when you're starting out that's to be expected.
So expanding on this idea, or not this idea, but to make an idea off of this, like, we have podcasts here, and the podcasts that some of the ones that we do are just, hey, you're there, I'm here, let's just talk. And this is different. This is more entrepreneur, but the ones over there are going to be more like, talking about Top Gun and where does the conversation go to? And all of a sudden we're talking about JFK assassination, and it's just all over the place. Is there a pool of writers? Like, do you have a network, or is there a Facebook group, or is there a Reddit page that be like, hey, like, for you have a team that produces all these premises that you can either riff on or not use or whatever. Is there a service out there, or maybe not even service? Is there people I can hire? They're like, hey, I want to do a podcast. I want 10 current events that are premises of whatever. Is there a system? Is there people out there that could help produce that?
Yeah. So beyond the obvious places like Upwork or freelance.com or whatever, there was a company I was affiliated with. And initially called Comedy Wire, where people would hire comedy writers to write jokes for them through that app. And what I use, yes, I have a network of people because I have comedy students. And so I reach out to my students and I say, who wants this opportunity? And then they send me like a sample list of jokes. And then I pick people from that. And I also have a Facebook group of comedy writers that I reach out to. So anybody can reach out to that group. Like if you were looking for comedy writers, you'd get a lot of really good submissions just posting on that group.
And is it just like, hey, for every premise, every joke, here's $1?
Well, it would be the way I like to do comedy is in bigger lists. So a list of 15 or 20 or 25 is going to be a lot more fruitful because you're going to find one or two jokes in there that work. If you just get one joke, it's probably not going to work.
Okay, so it's like
so it'd be like, yeah, $25 for a list of 25 would be a reasonable place to start. Yeah.
And then it's like, and then if you do that with 3 or 4 people, and Sally over here, you pulled 18 jokes, and Bob over here, you got 3. Well, maybe we don't work with Bob again.
You know who to hire. Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And so I'm working on a new comedy book now. And so I've got a writing staff for that. And they're going to get paid a little bit more because that book will have an advance from a publisher and it'll have a budget. But it'll be a similar model where people will send lists of jokes and they'll get paid like per list. But then if they do any more writing, like if they write a whole section or an essay or something like that, they'll get a bigger chunk. So, and that's more like a percentage of the profits because they'll sort of get like a percentage of the advance,
Well, going back to Upwork, like I've used Upwork and I use Fiverr, but the problem is, for me at least, when you have, it's like the water everywhere, but not a drop to drink, in the sea. When you have so many people, it's like, how do you find the right one? And so it's so daunting that I'm like, I usually just give up. Like most of my hires and even in my virtual assistant teams is like, do you know anybody? Because you're adding the element of trying to hire overseas. And then you're like, just find me somebody. So like the referral network I appreciate that. So I would love to connect and try to put some of your students or some of your writers to additional work.
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons that they're in that Facebook group is to learn about opportunities, and I love sharing them with them. The thing about applying for a job in comedy is that people are expected to do a submission. Like that's your application is 10 sample jokes, and then you can do that qualification of, Susie versus the other guy with the 18 jokes and the 5 jokes or whatever. You need to see that before you start paying, just to get started. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, how do you even know if that's how I would separate the water from the drop to drink is the initial submission.
Pivot slightly, going back to editorial and you can even bring in the writers on this, when there's disputes or disagreements on ideas, like how do you handle, and I think conflict is probably too harsh of a word, but in the absence of a thesaurus, I'll just say, how do you handle that conflict?
Yeah, so I wrote a whole book about this. I wrote this book series, How to Write Funny, and the 3rd book in the series is all about writing in a group and how to manage a group of writers, because The Onion was an opportunity for me to develop this whole system for how to manage creative people and pick the best ideas so that you're judging the ideas by merit and not by, other factors. So in a writer's room, it's so easy to pick the funniest person's joke because they said it the funniest or they're the funniest person everyone likes the most. And with comedy writing, it's just, there's so much ego tied in with the work that it's so easy for egos to get bruised, people to get upset. They write a whole list and not one of their jokes gets on the short list. They're going to be upset. And so this whole system I developed basically comes down to the anonymity of the jokes. So they have to submit their jokes and they all go on a list where you don't know who wrote what joke. And you make sure every writer is invested in the end product being great. So And everybody understands that they have bad weeks sometimes. They're going to have weeks where they don't write a single joke that works. Totally fine. We all have that. But they need to celebrate the jokes that work. So people are encouraged to sort of vote on or chime in on the jokes that they didn't write and say whether they like them or not. And then I'm doing all this virtually now, there's no live writer's room, but I'm looking at everybody's opinion about the jokes. And then I have my own opinion, and I can assess whether I agree with the majority or I don't agree. But ultimately, when it comes to comedy, I feel like there has to be one person who's in charge, whose comedy voice is ultimately going to be the arbiter of what works. So that person has to have veto power, and that person can pick a joke that nobody else liked at their peril, because that generally means that you're wrong. Everyone didn't like it. It probably doesn't work. So I learn a lot from just listening to the opinions of other people. And because a lot of times people are too nice, and this is the biggest problem in comedy. They just say, oh yeah, I thought that was really good. It was X, Y, and Z. Very rare that someone will say, I didn't like that joke, thought it was stupid. But that's the most valuable feedback, because that's what the end reader or audience is going to be thinking. They're going to be thinking, that sucks, not funny. It's just too rude to say that to another coworker, like in a writer's room meeting.
Yeah.
The anonymity gets you past that. So now you just don't comment on the ones that you think suck. You only point out, oh, on this list of 25, I thought these 3 were great. You're saying 22 of the jokes sucked, but you don't have to say that. And somebody feels good. Hey, 3 of my jokes were good. They feel good.
Well, that's interesting, because one thing that sparks an idea in my head is the fact that, like, say we do a video and we get millions of views, thousands of compliments in the comment section, and then there's 3, that guy's fat, that guy's bald, or whatever, and it's like, that's the one as humans we fixate on, so just not even addressing this. Hey, let's just focus on the hey, you did 3 was great. The ego, it gives a little bump.
Yeah. Those haters are unfortunate, but what are you going to do? You're right. You have to ignore them. Yeah. And you got to look at the ratio. You got to look at the ratio.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the perspective is like, this is why all my clients, everybody I work with, I always tell them it's all about perspective, because if you start from 0 and you're in a niche like real estate and you get 10,000 followers, but Charlie D'Amelio, whatever, has 10 billion followers, you're not in the same world. Having that comparison is beyond ridiculous. Same thing like me trying to, hey, Brad Pitt, Bullet Train, why is he getting attention? Why wasn't I cast? It's like, what reality? And I don't know, maybe that's a deeper conversation about the boomer generation making the next generations very super special, that we all think we're so special. Because that's one of my soapboxes lately is like, you're not special. Like, Elon Musk is special. Scott Dikkers is special. Like, Obama is special. Like, there are special people out there, but
here's the
most
story
people aren't.
Here's the story I always tell for that. It's not a story. It's just a little analogy. But every morning, I believe Steven Spielberg wakes up feeling terrible about himself because he'll never be as successful as Walt Disney. And he's like, damn it, that guy, he won so many more Oscars. He made so many more movies. We all do that. And there's always somebody better. Like, why are we doing that?
And you say that, but that's been happening for all of time. Like, Caesar conquered Europe, and then all he could do was, I think if I remember my history right, when he gets to Alexandria, sees a statue of Alexander the Great, and he weeps because Alexander did it by the time he was 28, and he's like 40. It's like, dude, you conquered the world at 40, but because you didn't do it at the same age,
totally,
it's just, yeah, he's a failure.
Yeah. So all those people you mentioned, like Elon Musk, probably has this deep anxiety that he'll never be John D. Rockefeller. He'll never be Thomas Edison.
So when is enough enough?
I mean, that's the big philosophical question.
Well, I mean, that's why we're here, get all the answers from you.
So for me, I feel like you have to have gratitude. You have to meditate. You have to go easy on yourself. And, I see people as just like all one level. To me, everybody is at the same level. And that helps me to not think that there are some people who are better, some people who are worse, because there are people who are quote unquote better in one category, but they suck in another category. Elon Musk apparently is a terrible parent. He's a great inventor and businessman, but there are people I know who are a million times better as a parent
right.
than him. So it's like everybody's got a different skill level, a different talent, a different ability, and some of them are sexier than others. They look better on the cover of a magazine or whatever. But I believe that we are all on a level playing field, and that helps me to remember that.
What does success look like for you?
Success for me looks like being happy, being at peace with myself, regardless of the external circumstances. That to me is success in a nutshell. Feeling fulfilled, regardless of the external circumstances.
Right. And as far as the future, what does the future hold for you? Like what's on the horizon? I know you mentioned your book.
Yeah.
You're putting together.
So I'll be doing more comedy books. I'll be writing more novels. And I'm excited to have sort of found this lane in my life of doing something that I love, that I'm obsessed with. And for me, it's about eliminating distraction from that and just focusing as much as possible on doing what I love doing, which is creating comedy, telling stories. And so I try to keep an open mind about what shape that takes. But right now it takes the shape of writing more books, getting on stage more, performing more, and also sharing with other people what I've learned about that, because there's almost nothing more fulfilling for me than seeing a student or somebody I mentor succeed big. And then I get to just sit back and enjoy their comedy, because I spend most of my time creating comedy. It's hard to sit back and enjoy it because I'm in the business and it's like I'm at work. Why would I want to watch a comedy movie? I'm at work. So the greatest gift the universe can give back to me is a piece of comedy, like a stand-up special or a book or a movie that somebody I mentored worked on, and I can sit back and get a hearty laugh from that. That's like, I don't even think that a parent whose child goes off and becomes a doctor ever feels that level of pride, because not only do I feel that level of pride, but I'm getting this gift back. They're like giving me comedy. They're making me laugh at the same time. So I'm hoping that the future is more of that, hoping I live a good long life where I get many more decades of that.
So I've been holding on to this question since the beginning. What's your favorite joke?
What is my favorite joke of all time?
Yeah. It could be somebody else's. It could be yours. It could be anything.
There isn't one joke that I like carry with me. It usually like moves back and forth, and a new one will pop up. I guess my favorite joke right now, so this is very ephemeral. Like they always, there's always a new joke in my head. So my favorite right now, ask me next week, it might be different, is one of mine. And it's simply, women say they want a man with a sense of humor. It's not true, of course. Women want musicians. How many crazed groupies are waiting to have sex with Jim Davis outside his house when he finishes drawing the latest Garfield cartoon? Zero. Anyway, that's my...
I mean, I get it. Yeah. I know I want to be respectful of your time, but I do have one more question just because I'm in the media production business now. Do you write for movies? Do you write? Do you have you ever written a movie? Is that a goal? Because I know with The Onion, there was y'all did with the advent of the internet, y'all started moving into like skit comedy. So I think I don't know if y'all invented that, but I think y'all were one of the first ones to actually put it on the internet. But do you ever have aspirations to move out to Hollywood and do big budget films?
I used to, and I wrote and directed a couple of feature films that I produced independently and sold. And I learned through that process that I shouldn't be writing and directing feature films. I have too short an attention span, because by the time the movie is finishing up and I'm editing it, I'm not the same person, and I'm making a movie that I wouldn't choose to make at that point. But yes, I have written movies. I've optioned a couple of screenplays. My goal now is to write more novels and then option those as screenplays. I don't really have any aspirations to direct. That's too much of an extrovert's job, and I realized that I'm an introvert and I should be at home writing. And yeah, so I do enjoy that. As far as the sketch stuff goes, I enjoy that as well. And occasionally, I mean, to me, writing a stand-up bit is the same as writing a sketch, because the format is the same, so that's where I get my, that's where I satisfy all my need for sketch comedy.
Who's your favorite up and coming like comedian right now?
That's a great question. There's so many.
There's one, and I don't know. I know he does stand up. I think his name is Ryan Nichols. I don't know if you've seen him. He had a viral video, go back a little bit, where it was like a guy had a shirt that said woke, another guy had a shirt that said racist, and it was basically, the video was just saying they agree on everything, because all the stuff the ultra woke guy was saying, he's like, I agree with that. It was just showing how absurd society we live in is now.
Yeah. So one guy who I like, I've just been discovering his sketch comedy on YouTube, and it's Shane Gillis. Yeah. And he was hired to be a cast member on SNL and got fired because he had some questionable jokes like from 10 years ago. So the perfect kind of like bad cancel culture story or whatever. But that guy is really funny. And he's managed to sort of turn that getting fired from SNL lemon into lemonade by, taking charge of his own career and doing stuff independently, which I appreciate.
What are your thoughts on cancel culture? Because like some people would argue that it doesn't exist and it's just a made up Fox News thing. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it definitely exists, because there are people like that who apply for a job and then they find something you tweeted 10 years ago and they fire you, and maybe you get torn up for it on Twitter or whatever. But I think the more substantial part of cancel culture comes from the whole Me Too movement, where it was like women coming out and saying, oh yeah, that guy assaulted me. He's a creep, and you should all know about it. Like, I think that's great. Yeah. I think anybody who's a rapist should be called out and should be canceled. I'm on record that we should cancel those people. And I like somebody like Louis C.K., who took advantage of, like, this is my world. Like, so I like to mentor and train young comedy people. And he had an opportunity to do that, but instead he whips his dick out in front of them. So, I know him.
But he asked. I'm just kidding.
No, but
I know.
It's you know how wrong that is.
Yeah. So, no, I know. I'm just being absurd.
Fair enough. So I can't watch his comedy anymore. So of course, he has the right to go out there and do comedy. And he's got a bunch of fans who like don't care about that, who are incels and mostly guys, right. And that's his right. But his comedy is kind of ruined for me, because anytime he does like a masturbation joke, it dies for me, because it's just gross,
it's funny about that. What's that? Sorry.
Most of his comedy was masturbation based.
Well, it's funny because like I never thought of it that way because like I personally I don't have a strong opinion for or against Louis C.K., but I do remember pre-scandal, pre-coming to light, all this that I would actually consume his content, but I mean, other than seeing a couple of clips on the Andrew Schultz podcast, I don't really consume him anymore. And I don't know if I don't think it's me taking a stand. It's just maybe it's not relevant or maybe it's my subconscious saying I'm a better man. I don't want that. I don't know. Cause I mean, I have taken stands in my life before where I used to work in the Middle East. I was a sales guy at a construction materials company working in Dubai and working in Doha. And I always tell people, because people think, oh my God, Dubai, that's so amazing, so awesome. I was like, have you been? Yeah, it was great. I was like, how long were you there? They're like, 3 days. I'm like, okay, talk to me when you're there longer than a week. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, because your first 5-6 days, you see the glory, you see the lights, you see the thing. But by day 7,
they hide the Sharia law from you pretty well.
Well, but by day 7, you see human rights violations, you see modern day slavery. And you're like, so for me, after about 1.5 years, I was like, if I stay here, I'm condoning this behavior. So I took the pay cut and I got out,
Oh, good for you. It's great. It's hard to avoid. It's hard it's hard to boycott everything because there's so much of this world is evil and tainted. We got to do our best. So, I don't fault anybody who can't, but I also support anyone who wants to keep up the boycotts, and to keep pointing out who the rotten apples are, because I think too many people get away with being rotten.
Yeah. Is there a thing like rehabilitation? Is that a thing? Like, or is there ever for like Louis C.K., is there ever a comeback?
He had a great opportunity to come out and say, I've learned what I did was awful, and I'm donating money to, this group or that group, and I'm, a group that mentors female comedy writers or something. But
Right.
he came out did a Trump thing where he doubled down on it, and that just ruined it. He totally had an opportunity to
see. I'm so far removed. I didn't even see that.
Yeah,
it's a shame. But
yeah, so no, I think people are redeemable, to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think Sarah Silverman had, and I don't think it was a bit. I think she was just talking about and I think at the time she was commenting on like liberal like Democrats and how absurd it is to not allow somebody to progress. The cancel culture. It's like, okay, but if you got a guy from Kentucky who grew up in the Ku Klux Klan, never knew anybody of color, and then the first person of color he meets, he drops the Ku Klux Klan and now he's cool. Are you still going to hold over his whole life that's just how he was raised? So, and I'm paraphrasing horribly what she was bringing up, but she was just like, when did we become a culture of not being able to be redeemed?
Yeah. I'm the first one to forgive and forget if somebody, people have to be capable of learning, and we have to accept when people learn and grow. Like that's what are we doing if we can't do that?
Right. Well, it's a whole, we're all on a journey,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, on that, I really appreciate your time. I think it's so awesome how we met a couple of years ago, and just being able to talk to you then, talk to you now, and then seeing the growth. And then, I was looking at your website right before we came on, and we didn't talk about any of it just because the nature of conversation, you go where the conversation goes. But it seems like you've been just churning out books and really getting out there. It's amazing. And I can't wait to talk to you in another 2 years.
We'll do it.
As far as anything you got going on right now, any plugs, any more books, the Facebook group, what's the Facebook group? Can anybody join?
Yeah, the Facebook group is called How to Write Funny.
Uh-huh.
And anybody can join if you just answer the secret question. And to answer the secret question, you just have to know the basics of comedy writing that I lay out in my book. It's a pretty easy question. And I think if you just Google it, you get the answer pretty easy. So, or if you buy one of my courses, you're in the group, obviously.
Yeah.
And only people who buy the courses get to be in that writer's room. The group is for basically anybody who just wants to workshop comedy ideas.
Well, I definitely am going to poach is not the right word, but recruit. I'm definitely interested in coming in and seeing if we can put some of your students to work and pay them the right wage. But that's why you ask, because again, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm overpaying, and sometimes I feel like I'm underpaying. It just depends on what the role is.
Right. So my new podcast is called Scott Dikkers Around. Just me trying to be funny, doing a lot of silly voices and jokes. And the website is howtowritefunny.com for people who want to learn how to write comedy. And that's basically how to find me. I'm on all the socials.
Yeah.
Even spell my name wrong, I usually show up.
Last question. Any satirical projects you're working on right now?
Yeah, this book that I mentioned I'm working on, working title is So You Want to Be a Republican. That's sort of like a welcome guide to anyone who wants to be a Republican.
And then America.
I'm sure that word will be used. Yeah.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for gracing us your time. I really appreciate this. I really am a huge fan. Just listening to you talk, I know we're talking about comedy, but for me, it seems like there's so many lessons of what you just went through that can be applied to business or entrepreneurism as general. So again, thank you so much for doing this. You're welcome, sir. Yeah. Take care. Good luck with everything. Take care, man. Again, I appreciate it. Talk to you in a couple of years. All right. Yes, sir. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. Man, I could talk to that guy for hours. He is awesome. I just love that dude. He's so inspiring. He's so funny. His mentorship. I really look forward to talking to him in 2 years from now. Make sure you follow him. Make sure you pick up one of his books. Would love to hear in the comments who you would like us to talk to next. This channel, we're talking to real estate investors, entrepreneurs, just to help, anything business related. We really want to really explore those ideas. So again, thank you so much for being here. I'm Ryan Harper. Find me on all the social medias, Ryan S. Harper, and we'll see you next time.